This is not the Bachelorette anymore. This is something kind of just like a different type of experiment and a different type of dating show. And it's interesting. I mean, I'm so excited to see what's going to happen. But yeah, I do feel like the two of them got a little bit ripped off. And I don't know. I'm worried. I'm concerned.
I am worried. Hi, we are Julie and Kelly, and we're here to find love. We are two dating coaches analyzing frothy shit on reality dating shows, and we're analyzing The Bachelorette with Gabby and Rachel season.
This was a very interesting season premiere for The Bachelorette because obviously we have two bachelorettes, and that is going to change the whole format of the show. It's going to make the whole kind of experiment that is at the heart of The Bachelor very, very different because, you know, usually the point is that it's one woman dating 30 men and she gets to, you know, just each week narrow down to the guy she's most interested in. But because we have two bachelorettes, what we're starting to see based on the way this episode is panned out and the way the previews were suggesting, there's going to be a little bit more of a tension between, you know, which guys are here for which women, and, you know, the power might be a little bit more, I guess, balanced than in a typical season. So we'll get into our thoughts on this format, but first let's talk about just first impressions, because really what this episode focused on, we didn't get a lot of first impressions about the guys. They kind of skipped over doing actual intros for the men, so we don't really know very much about any of them, frankly, but we got a lot of great cutesy with Rachel and Gabby. I was so delighted, honestly, the whole episode that I was just like, oh my gosh, they're so cute. I think this is like the first time in a long time that I feel like I am just, actually that's not true. I was really excited for Michelle's season of The Bachelorette. When Michelle was The Bachelorette, I was like really rooting for her. But like, I feel like these two are just they're so deserving. They are just both really wonderful. They are both just, honestly, just interesting, sweet, good people. And so I don't know, I'm so excited to root for them. Folks who watched our recaps of Clayton's season, you know, I was never really a Rachel fan from the beginning. I kind of was like a little bit skeptical of her. I was a little concerned that she was being overly, I don't know, performative, like on her first date. We'll pop the video over here if you want to watch what we thought about her date with Clayton, her one-on-one. I was just like really concerned with why she was whispering so much. And, you know, I just felt like she was like doing this weird, like, I don't know, overly performed or orchestrated, like, romantic and sensual thing. But I feel like she's like really grown on me since we got to the end of last season. And so I feel like we've got two really great gals for us to root for. Now, are they going to find love at the end of this? I don't know. That's a different question.
But, yeah.
But I feel really excited to cheer for them.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying about Gabby and Rachel. I think their dynamic plays nicely with each other. Gabby could have been her own bachelorette. I don't know if Rachel could have been her own bachelorette. There's something about her personality really being brought out to life by Gabby. And it's very interesting that you say that you didn't really like Rachel in Clayton's season because she felt a little performative. I felt that a little bit last night because I don't even want to compare her and Gabby, but we can't help but compare them because there are two different bachelorettes. And I think that's going to be an ongoing theme the rest of the season. They're just going to be constantly comparing what their personalities are like, and it will be a little bit tricky for the guys to navigate and for the audience to like really know who we're rooting for. Because I think Gabby comes across so genuine and kind of awkward. She reminds me of Jennifer Lawrence in her heyday. Do you remember when she was like, I'm a pizza eating person? Like, Jennifer
Lawrence. Bitch who eats pizza.
Yeah.
I know. So
she's like,
radical.
I'm awkward. I'm like a quirky girl. You know, like I think Gabby so leans into that. And Rachel is like this seductress that's very like soft and romantic and is very aware of how she comes across. So it's really interesting looking at them two as leads. And I couldn't help but like continue to compare. And I hate doing that because I don't love like pitting women against each other, but it's hard not to be like, I wonder how Gabby and Rachel's story is going to go because they are so different. But what do you think about like their differences?
You bring up a really good point because I agree that one thing I did notice once Rachel and Gabby were starting their first night, like the limo entrances and everything, and then they went to the mansion to start talking to the guys, I was noticing that Rachel, it felt to me like she was not giving as much, I think, in terms of just, I don't know, we get so much from any interaction with Gabby. We get so much personality out of her. She's just so funny and interesting to watch. And Rachel, I did sense a little bit more once she was in front of those guys, and this is the thing. It's like when she's with Gabby, I feel like Rachel kind of comes alive. It's like, and to be fair, we all kind of do this. We all are a little bit different depending on who we're around, right? This is not a specific to Rachel thing, which was kind of occurring to me as I was watching this. I behave differently when I'm with a group of my girls versus when I'm, on a date and trying to be all sexy and whatever, right? It's a different, it's just a little bit of a different vibe, right? So Rachel's not alone in this, but the thing I think that I was noticing is there's such a huge difference between how she is with Gabby, when it's just like her and Gabby just like squealing and screaming and cheering, versus how she is with the guys, where it did feel like she was trying to be a little bit put together, a little bit of, just like a little bit more, there was like a performance aspect to it that felt a little bit, not stale, but just rigid to me.
Yeah.
In comparison to when she's with Gabby, when I feel like we're getting so much more of her personality, she's so much more willing to like open up and blossom. So you're right. I feel like I don't know how Rachel would have done if she was by herself, because Gabby is kind of pulling out a lot of Rachel's. Like, Gabby is kind of doing a lot of the legwork in terms of, like, supplying personality and helping Rachel, come through with that. And so, I will be curious to see. I know nobody wants to be comparing them, but unfortunately, every single guy here, all 32 of these men, in their heads, what they're doing is trying to figure out which one of these women they like better, right? That's what is going to happen. And that's just, we already see this in the preview, right? All of them need to decide who do they actually want to pursue, and that's going to involve, to some extent, comparing them. Now, hopefully this doesn't become like which woman is more wifey material or whatever,
Yeah.
This is not about which woman is like the better woman. It might
devolve to that. I have a feeling.
Unfortunately, it could devolve into that. Ideally, what this is just each guy trying to determine which of these women they connect more with, which is a valid thing that anyone should be trying to figure out if you're dating multiple people and trying to eventually date one person, right? You're just trying to feel out, who do I actually have the strongest connection with? And that's the thing that I was also noticing. Rachel and Gabby are so different. I mean, we've known this since Clayton's season, but they're such different people with such different personalities. I was noticing this in the scene when the two of them were talking before the first night. They were like kind of discussing what their types were and stuff like that. And Rachel goes like, yeah, I just really like, tall, athletic guys. And that's basically it. And Gabby goes, yeah, well, I like to have a sense of humor. I like a guy who can, is in touch with their emotions. I like a guy who can make decisions. Like, Gabby had so many, really thoughtful attributes to describe what she is looking for in a partner. And Rachel was like, I like tall and athletic guys. Like, Rachel!
I mean, I get it, Rachel. I was the same way when I was her age, because Rachel's 26 and Gabby's 31. So there's also an age difference with how they're approaching dating with maturity. I do agree that, I think the amazing thing is that they're such good friends that I don't think they're going to let a guy get in their way. Even though they seem like they have really different taste, I don't think that's going to be the case. I feel like there will be some guys that they will be interested in, and I'm very curious on how they will interact with that. If one of them rejects one of the bachelorettes and still dates the other bachelorette, how that would impact the way that they talk to each other about the men that they're seeing and their final top three or their final rows. So that's a lot of, I don't know, it feels a little bit more similar to dating. It feels kind of like BIP, but a lot more competitive. Yes. Doesn't it?
When there's more than one person that you can be with, and it's not 1 to 30, right? The way it happens on Bachelor in Paradise, it is just the whole reason why, people date around so much, because you have a lot of options and there's not this pressure to demonstrate to one person, no, I'm here for you, I'm committed to you. That is different in this season because whereas, you know, in previous premieres, every person is coming in saying like, oh my gosh, here's what I loved about you. Here's why I really think that we could be a good match. In this season premiere, it was kind of like all of the guys were holding their cards to their chest a little bit.
No one was saying who they were there for. Yeah.
Right. Everyone was a little bit hesitant to be really direct about saying, like, I really, really like you and I think we could be a thing. As opposed to in most seasons of The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, where everyone is kind of, there's a pressure to really demonstrate that kind of commitment or that kind of, like, focused attention really early on. And so in that sense, I feel like the season is going to be very similar in many ways to a season of BIP, except for with the stakes a lot higher, because there's still this feeling like everyone should be there trying to find a marriage. That's kind of like this, there's this pressure that is still there. It's like, oh my God, are Gabby and Rachel going to succeed, or are they going to fail and not be able to get married? Like there's this like high stakes pressure there that's not usually there in BIP. But then there's also the like kind of commitment issues that you get from BIP that are happening in this season now.
Yes, it did seem a little bit frustrating for me when I was watching the trailer at the very end, and Gabby and Rachel were in tears about the guys basically picking who they like the best after feelings are already invested at that point. I think this is going to be a really big mind trip for the both of them to take on, and it will be like Clayton's season. Unfortunately, it does seem like a continuation of The Bachelor trying to fit poly ideals into a monogamous show. Like the way that they're dating, the way that they are meeting their matches, the way that the matches are choosing them. There's a lot of consent into that. So there's a lot more open communication, and I think a lot more heartbreak that can occur because hopefully more honest conversations can actually transpire. I don't know if they will get engaged at the end. I think they will find someone, but I think it will be a harder journey for them than I initially thought it would be before I saw this episode.
I think that preview really suggests that, to your point, there's going to be a weird power struggle between the guys and the bachelorettes, which is never present in The Bachelorette or The Bachelor. That's never really a dynamic that is there. And, you know, it's tough because it kind of, it's just removes the whole premise of the show, which is if you had a line of 30 men who all really are great quality matches for you and who are all here to date you, will that process make it easier for you to find your perfect match, right? Yeah. That's the premise of this show, and now that premise is just tossed out the door because it's not like you're getting 30 men who are there for you. You're getting 30 men we're deciding between you and another person, and that completely changes everything because you're not coming in with that presumption of commitment, that presumption of interest. And sure, that might make it a little bit more like real life, but then why are we pretending that this is some kind of special dating experiment when it's not? It's now it's just, okay, dating. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
It's like, okay, this is just this typical, we're now getting into, you know, the typical when you are dating someone and you don't know how committed they are to you, and you don't know if you should lean in too far or too fast because you want to make sure, like, hey, if I'm really interested in this person, I want to make sure that we are on the same page and are both committing to it before, you know, I just put my whole heart out there, right? And in this situation, it's kind of like Gabby and Rachel are now in a situation where they have to put their whole hearts out there, but the guys don't, right? And so it's almost like real life dating, but worse.
It's worse
for the bachelorettes in some ways because they have to be vulnerable in a way that the guys almost don't. So.
Exactly. I thought the exact same thing when I was watching it, and I didn't even consider that power dynamic of how, because listen, like for the Bachelor and the Bachelorette, there is a very clear hierarchy and a very clear power dynamic that exists where the lead is slightly elevated amongst the contestants because it's very much about their love story. This show, this particular format has completely mellowed that out. So now it's all about everyone's individual story. So because of that, I think the chances of a happy ending in the traditional Bachelor sense, we're getting further and further away from that.
I also think that it's tough because they are getting a little bit ripped off. Gabby and Rachel, I mean,
I think so.
They're not actually coming in to 30 guys wanting to date them, which is, in theory, what being the Bachelorette is all about. They're coming into 30 guys who are deciding if they want to date them. And that's not the same. It's really not the same premise at all. And, in theory, what could happen is we have 25 guys who want to date Gabby and 5 guys who want to date Rachel, or worse, right? We have, in theory, this could end up really poorly for one or both of them. And so, yeah, it's almost like this is not the Bachelorette anymore. This is something kind of just like a different type of experiment and a different type of dating show. And it's interesting. I mean, I'm so excited to see what's going to happen. But yeah, I do feel like the two of them got a little bit ripped off, and I don't know. I'm worried. I'm concerned.
I am worried. What I'm afraid is going to happen, Kelly, is that one of them, and that's what the trailer indicated, is that they will confess their feelings to one of the contestants, and the contestant will say, I'm not here for you. I'm here for the other person. And just to have those kind of rejections again and again, especially coming off something as traumatic as Clayton's season, where he was like radically transparent, but then he was also radically regressive with the way that he handled a lot of his relationship conflict. I think it will just put Gabby and Rachel in an extremely vulnerable place.
Yeah. The thing with this show is it has always kind of forced people to be, the whole point of it is like you're supposed to be really vulnerable, and if you're put into, if you go on enough dates with someone and are put into these vulnerable situations and these intense emotional situations, love can occur from that.
Yeah.
In a more expedited fashion, and in, this kind of like structured way, you can kind of create and find love from this structure. But now it feels like with this, the way this is happening, it's like you're asking people to be vulnerable with not really any guarantee that anything is going to come of it at the end, right? So like Rachel and Gabby are now going to be vulnerable with lots of men who there's no guarantee. So if Gabby decides she wants to go on a date with guy X, and they go on a date and they go on several dates, and guy X is like, yeah, I still I'm trying to see if I like Gabby, goes on a couple dates with her and realizes that, and he's also going on a couple dates with Rachel, realizes that actually his feelings are with Rachel and not Gabby. Gabby has been pursuing each of these dates with increasing vulnerability, thinking that, this is going somewhere, going down throwing herself down the rabbit hole of vulnerability, only to realize that that guy was not falling with her. He wasn't intending to be at the end, to catch her. His intention was, I'm sussing things out while you free fall, right?
It's really confusing. I feel like the guys have a little bit more power this season. Gabby and Rachel do too, with how they pursue and how they pick people to follow along the journey. But then after that, it's immediately out of their hands, because the guy can kind of commit to whichever one of them. And I don't really know how that's going to play out, or if the season will end and they'll be I actually really loved the other lead, but I committed to you. I could see that happening too. It's so confusing in this format. I'm very curious on how the producers are going to handle it, because how do you get equal time with each guy? How do you go on a group dates? What happens if you like the same person?
Yeah, I'm trying to contextualize it, or trying to think about what this looks like outside, in real life dating, how this compares to how real life dating works. But I think the thing with real life dating is people are not being pressured to go all in with some guy you met on a dating app, right? You meet some guy on a dating app. It's not like the idea is that you're there spilling your guts out to him on the first date, and then you're shocked that he's not interested in you afterwards, right? It's much more level insofar as, both people are coming in with this sense of, wanting to suss each other out, and there's not this kind of pressure to be vulnerable right away. Right. But in this situation, it's very different, because there is this pressure to be vulnerable and form deeper connections without the guarantee that the person is going to be there in the end. And so It's almost worse than real life dating. So
it's worse. No, this is worse, Kelly. After talking to you, I think it's worse because I think that, like, was this not the exact thing that happened with Clayton's season that they were traumatized by? The fact that who do I love the most? Who is best for me? They both had such an issue with the way that he chose that language. Gabby in particular was like, I'm not in competition of anybody. Like, this is my journey. And now the show is kind of continuing that very same train of thought. I kind of was hoping that when they would do the show, at some point they would kind of split off, where the men would have to commit to one of the leads, and then they would have their own individual stories of those guys. I don't know how it's going to work if they're still dating the same people up to the final 4 or the final 6. That seems really confusing.
I completely agree. I guess we'll find out and see how this pans out. It seems like to some extent they're also just like kind of letting Gabby and Rachel make it up as they go. They're like, okay, how do you want to do this? And they're like, So, you know, I feel like in theory they might decide somewhere along the line that they want to kind of section off the guys that they're each dating, maybe once they get to like the final 6 or something like that, each of them. So we'll see. We recently reviewed The Ultimatum, which if you didn't watch that show, you can watch our little recaps. We'll put them up above so you can watch what we had to say about that show. But in that show, they did something very similar where they were just like, here, you go live with this random guy for 3 weeks and see if you develop affection. And the problem with that premise was that if you open yourself up to love with someone and you live with them for 3 weeks, you can develop feelings. And it's not like there's anything shocking about that. And it feels like in this season, they're doing this weird thing where it's kind of like, okay, if one of these guys goes on increasingly vulnerable dates with 2 women, he might develop feelings for both of them, and that's not going to be a weird or shocking thing. And if they encouraged these men to develop deep relationships with 2 women, they're going to develop deep relationships with 2 women. So no one should get to the end and be surprised, like, how could you do that? How could you have feelings for both of them? It's like, if you put them in situations where they're gonna like be asked to become vulnerable and develop connections with these girls, don't be surprised at the end when they have feelings for 2 of them. Okay, we've talked a lot, so before we move on, if anyone is still here watching at this point of the video, comment down below, this season is gonna be bananas. That's the secret phrase. This season is gonna be bananas, so we know that you have watched until this point of the video and you are a true Here to Find Love fan, and we'll respond to you. We'll know. The real ones will know.
We will know.
Yeah,
we'll
comment down comment down below if you've watched until this point. And also, please let us know what you're thinking about this season too. What are your predictions for the season? How do you think this is going to go for Rachel and Gabby? We're so curious to hear other people's thoughts because clearly we are baffled and think that this is.
We have no idea. I think it's going to be bad. I knew that this season was going to be really perplexing. I was hoping it was going to be more of a BFF situation, and I think there will be themes of that, but I do think that the guys are going to have much more. They're going to be in the driver's seat a lot more than I'm used to, and I just never love giving men power. So,
Okay, one thing I will say before we move on and talk about standout guys is that I do have a secret hope that Gabby and Rachel will just like
get together,
say fuck it, and then go date each other. Yes, that's so my dream. They're so
really
cute. Every time they talk, their faces are like this close to each other, and I'm like, I just want to smash their faces together. like dolls,
just a little closer. Totally. When I had Barbies, I would just smash my Barbies and make them do inappropriate things. But yeah, I would actually kind of love that if they would just like fuck it to the season. And they just like even left the guys behind. Yeah, or like ran off together, went on vacation together. There's so many beautiful ways to play it. I just don't want the show to get ahead of them. Like, I want them to stay in control the entire way through. I don't want the show to like get in their way, for the guys to get in their way. Let's talk about standout guys. So this will be different than our initial first impressions of any other season because we saw nothing about these guys. Some guys came on the screen for a few seconds, nothing super noteworthy, but I did see 2 guys that I thought, okay, And I told Kelly about this last night, and she was just like typical Julie. But I was really...
Guys, if you are new here, I need you all to know that Julie is a villain lover. Julie is a villain lover. She loves villains. She just, as soon as she sees a villain, she's like, oh yeah, that one.
I will say that there's a reason why I think that there is something appealing about these particular people on the show, or maybe with villains. I think that they're great at making first impressions. And that's kind of what the show is all about. I think that the quieter, more genuine guys, they don't put themselves out there as much as the people that are there with an agenda. So as I'm saying that, keep that... My God, this hair is crazy. As I'm saying that, keep that in mind, because the reason why these guys are standing out is because they made such a great first impression with the girls, but people that make really good first impressions, you can't judge it on that. You have to really base it off character.
Yeah.
So I will say that. I will say Tino, which was like a really hot Miles Teller. And then Erich definitely made such an impression on me. And not just me. Like, I would say I could see that it visibly impacted Gabby and Rachel. And that's why I kind of was like, okay, there's something to these guys in the way that they're interacting with them. I think they're going to make it decently far. This was kind of like Brandon Jones and Michelle in her season. I think that that's a really good example of when you're a lead, you really want someone that shows that they're there for you, or that they really, really like you. And I think those two guys made it pretty clear that they were really into the leads, and I can see them kind of eating that up.
You're completely right that those two clearly left a big impression on the ladies. I mean, I think it's in part because both of them are very attractive in like the most obvious way.
It helps, yeah. They're tall, they're white, yeah.
Yeah, I know. They're just very obviously attractive, and so it, at the same time, it's kind of like their confidence, or their overconfidence, almost I would even say like entitlement, that kind of is the red flag for me. Because, I mean, especially Erich, who talked to both women, right? Yeah, he talked to both Rachel and Gabby, and he seemed very pissed off that he didn't win either of the first impression roses. You know, that energy, that in and of itself is like enough to make you kind of want to step back. Now, granted, I will say that, you know, there was no drama really in this first episode, and it is possible that the producers were trying to kind of amp this up to make it seem more dramatic than it was, or like he was complaining more than he was. Maybe he made like one comment and they like blew it up into a big thing. But that aside, from what we saw, it did seem like he seemed very like, yeah, the ladies love me. What? No roses for me? Oh, how could they do this to me? Like, his energy was just was a very entitled type of energy to me. But you're right, it's confusing because in person with each of the women, you know, he's very charming. And that's the thing. It's like, confidence is a funny thing, because confidence is what makes people attractive too. But then there's also confidence that can easily trickle over into arrogance, which is the trouble with a guy like Erich. You kind of need to suss out like where that's gonna go, right? I feel like it's possible that maybe this was just like he was just had a poor reaction today. Maybe he'll be a very sweet, lovely guy in the next couple of episodes. But just from what we saw, it just, to me, it would give me pause. And honestly, I when a guy is a little too confident of when they're kind of coming on to me in terms of like, oh, it's very obvious that you're going to be into me and like me, that confidence can be, to me, just like a little off-putting. And I feel like Erich, and actually Tino too, both came in with that energy to Rachel and Gabby. They just both came in with that kind of energy of, girls love me, and I know you're going to love me too. And it's tough because you want people to be self-assured, you want people to be confident in themselves, but it's like a fine line, right? It's this fine line between like confident and cocky. That doesn't make them bad guys. Let's see how it pans out. But for me, I was just getting from both of them just a little bit of a slimy vibe. It would take me,
interesting.
It'll take another like week or two before I would like be able to suss out whether or not, you know, that's just like their personalities. They're just like a little bit like that, but they're good guys, or if it is in fact coming from an element of, arrogance, which TBD. And I think there is a little bit of prejudice. I will acknowledge on my part, I have a bit of a prejudice. White dudes who are just extremely traditionally attractive takes a lot more for me to like warm up to them, because I just feel like I just in some ways assume the worst, that when you are occupying this position of privilege where you get a lot of attention naturally, and just people are going to fawn over you just because you look beautiful, it can have an effect on your personality and how you move through the world. It can make you a little bit arrogant because you're used to getting that kind of attention. And so I have a little bit of a prejudice that I'll name here in terms of like, you got to prove to me that you're like a nice guy if you are coming in both looking like that and with that just like a little bit of that overconfident attitude. You're gonna have to like take a minute to prove to me that you're not an asswipe. Versus I feel like with like Rachel, for example, she was like just so it seems to me that she's very attracted to looks. Like that's just what I got the sense from her, and it kind of made me realize, I'm like, I think Rachel might have like a little bit of like a bad guy picker radar, right? She's talked about being in a lot of relationships with guys who were just like total jerks to her, which 0% surprises me. Like just 0%, given like the kinds of guys that she was gravitating toward. I know Twitter loved Tino. I saw a lot of people like, oh my god, the kiss between Rachel and Tino was so great. I was concerned. I was just kind of like, oh my god, I'm getting like such bad vibes. Honestly, my like little red flag radars were going off. I was like, oh my god, Rachel, please don't let that boy hurt you. That's what was like happening in my brain. And so, but TBD, I mean, this is just an initial first reaction, and I want to see, don't want to like settle the record here that like I hate Tino, but for now, I just I feel like my spidey senses are tingling, and I want to see a little bit more before I can fully buy into the Tino thing.
I felt like they were kind of the only few guys that really got to talk to them individually and then feel that immediate spark. And we've spoken about this in so many past seasons when we've recapped the show. People really care about the spark. Like, I love a slow burn, but people really love that initial energy of like attraction, and I could be really into you. We're laughing at the same jokes. We have the same sense of humor. That will carry them through at least mid-season. But I totally agree. I also have a prejudice. I don't want to date white guys. Like, that's kind of like my own personal thing. Like, I just feel like I just can't. So, like, it's so not for me, but for Gabby and Rachel, do your thing, Yeah, also,
I want to, like, throw this out there. Like, I'm currently dating, like, an attractive white guy. I mean, listen, I'm not saying that don't date white people.
We're not saying, like...
I'm just saying, spidey senses. I'm just, I need to be proven... I think that when guys are that attractive,
almost,
when guys are that attractive, I think people's instincts are to like, oh my gosh, like give them benefit of the doubt. But I'm like the opposite. I'm like, if you're that attractive, it's like you're guilty until proven innocent. Like, versus most people, I think will see a guy like that and be like, you're great until you prove me otherwise, right? And I come in a little bit with the opposite perspective of like, I'm skeptical until you can prove that I can trust you, right?
I think that's the better way to date, honestly, just personally and professionally. It's just good to wait until investment and trust is not earned, but there is an investment with how much you guys are mutually sharing, and there is true reciprocity on both sides. We will see. Like, maybe Tino and Erich will totally surprise us. I do agree that I was getting some hints of, like, they might be bad boys of the season. But TBD. The season just feels so unpredictable. There's not really any spoilers out there for the season 2.
If you are curious, if you didn't watch the episode and you just actually want to know who to pay attention to, these are the guys who actually did get one-on-one airtime with the girls. We got Mario was the person who was Gabby's first kiss and her first impression rose. Most people on Twitter seem to not be fans of their kiss. I thought it was fine, but a lot of people thought it was like, people had they had maybe not the best chemistry ever. But anyways, Mario, guy to watch. Tino was Rachel's first kiss and Rachel's first impression rose. We have Erich, who was the guy who talked to both of them. Actually, there was another guy who talked to both of them first, which was Logan. Logan was getting a little bit teased as perhaps like he could be another villainous character because he seemed to be equally interested in talking to both of them, which doesn't strike me as a bad thing. I think you should try to talk to both of them and figure out which one you have more of a connection with, but they were kind of trying to like position Logan as doing something
insidious
or something.
Yeah. It's
right.
like that's the whole freaking show. He's literally doing what you guys put him in.
Right, exactly. So anyways, Logan did it first, followed by Erich. Who else? Yeah, we had Jacob, the shirtless guy who came in on a horse. He kind of got actually a pretty good amount of airtime. I don't know if it was because his shirt was off and it was nice to look at, or if it was because he is actually maybe going to be a critical player in the season, but we got a lot of him. We also got a lot of Avon. I feel like Avon got some good airtime with, I think he was talking to Rachel. Avon, to me, he was reminding me a lot of Randall from The Ultimatum, both because I think they look kind of similar, but also he had just like a similar like vibe. So I'll be curious to see what the story with Avon is. He seemed very sweet to me. And then we had, I think the last person, two more. We had Jordan, the guy with the race car who Rachel was really into. She seemed to just like enjoy the race car talk because she's a pilot, which I know.
I was thinking it's such a simple connection, but she loved it.
I know. She was like, this is great.
I was like, girl, look out for his values. Like, I get that his job is cool too. It was
so funny to me.
Yeah.
It was so cute, but she seemed to be into it. And then we had Brian, the guy who shushed Gabby, which everyone was like, on Twitter, everyone was like, oh my God, I can't believe he shushed Gabby. But she seemed to be into it. She was laughing. She was having a good time. Seemed to be part of like their banter, as they say.
Yeah.
Banter.
Yeah.
I can't say.
I can't even talk with an accent.
Oh my God. Anyway, so those are some guys to pay attention to, some guys that got at least some amount of airtime. I don't know that I'm like immediately drawn to any of them, frankly, but hopefully we'll get more of these guys' personalities starting next week.
I did love Hayden. Like, I thought Hayden was pretty attractive. He didn't get any airtime. I'll have his picture in the video. The only reason I know of this guy is because I'm editing this video and I had to go on the Bachelor Press page and I saw his pictures and I thought, wait, he looks super cute. He looks like a very, like, a Disney prince. Just really nice looking face.
Is he the guy who kind of looks like Joe the Grocer?
Yes, kind of. He has like that smile where it totally reaches his eyes. I really love people where like they smile with their face. He just looks so nice. Like you can, I don't know, maybe that's just me being like, I think I can read someone's face. TBD, we'll talk about him again when he gets more airtime and Kelly can kind of, you can see how my picker is as the season progresses because I literally have no idea.
What I'll say is, listen, I make fun of Julie's picker all the time, but she's the only one who picked Brandon out of the bunch in episode 1 of Michelle's season. She was like, Brandon, he is gonna go far, and I was like, who? What? I was so like,
you gave me shit for that.
He was a villain, but I gave you a lot of shit for it. I was completely wrong. He made it to the end, so you know.
Right.
Let's see how this all goes.
I think I have a really good picker for great first impressions. Like I have a good picker for like a good spark. Where that spark goes, no idea, but I can pick it out. I can tell if you might like someone. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Versus, I think I'm just like this like old skeptical hag. I'm like, why is he so charming? Gross.
God, we'd be really funny on a double date together. Like if we met some new guy. Because I love a romantic. I love someone that's wooing me. If someone gave me flowers, I'd be like, oh my God. That. You would be suspicious. You'd be so suspicious. I'm just like,
ew, you're being too sweet. Stop. It's too much.
I'd be like, quick, we gotta put this in a vase. I have to put this by my bed. I'm a very
this is hilarious.
Yeah, I'm a different. I think when I date, I just love being swept off my feet, and then But it takes a lot for me to go on a date, so maybe that's kind of like my filter. But we shall see how these girls do it. I am just Oh, so intrigued. I can't wait.
I know, I'm so intrigued. Let us know who the standout guys were for you. What did you all think of Tino and Erich, Julie's early crushes, and Hayden, who we didn't see? Let us know if you think he's a nice guy.
Do you think he's a nice guy from his face? Let us know in the comments below, because I do. I do.
Yeah. Let us know down below. Tell us who your standouts are. We want to hear about it. And yeah, that's all for this video. It was good being back. We'll be recapping all of The Bachelorette. We're back. It's so great. So we will see you next week for our Bachelorette recap of episode 2. And until then, yeah, that's all.
Talk to you guys. Bye.